Well, good morning, folks, and welcome to the Rangers Reviews morning briefing after more drop points at Ibrox against Aberdeen, this time a 2-2 draw, which seen Rangers only take 1 point instead of 3. Joined by Derek Clark and a return for Jonny McFarlane this morning on the podcast. We'll come to you in a second, Jonny. We'll start with you, Derek. You were at the game last night. Let's talk about the pre-match before we go into what unfolded in the 90 minutes, because there was a wonderful recognition of the contribution in life of Walter Smith to Rangers before the game, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was a great tifo display by the Union Bears in the Broomlawn stand before the game, and they were singing throughout Walter Smith's Blue and White Army and all that sort of stuff. It was a cracking atmosphere. Before that, it was sort of somber mood, quite quiet around the ground. Of course, there was tributes being laid at both sides of the Bill Struth stand, also at the John Gregg statue as well. And it was very somber and very quiet. It felt like, I know I spoke to Chris Jack yesterday, but almost like a church service with a game in between. It was a surreal sort of atmosphere. But during the game itself, as I mentioned, the crowd were, Stephen Gerrard mentioned this as well, the crowd were right behind the team, and you just felt that with Walter watching down, there'd be a grandstand finish and they'd go and find a winner, but unfortunately they just couldn't do that.
Yeah, okay, that sets us up nicely then, Derek, to talk about the 90 minutes. I'll start with you, Jonny. Stephen Gerrard said Rangers started the game well. Obviously, they would go behind with, I think they were 2-0 down by about 16 minutes in. Before we talk about both goals, do you agree with him? Do you think that was a start that showed intensity?
I thought it was an okay start. I think he might have been stretching it a little bit, to be honest. Rangers looked like they were in the mood in the first 2 or 3 minutes in terms of their aggression. But it wasn't long before Aberdeen went 1-0 up. And when they went 1-0 up, they very, very quickly, as we know, went 2-0 up. And I've got to be honest, at that point, Rangers were in utter shambles after going 2-0 down. And they had a terrific chance. They should have scored to make it 3-0. I don't know what the XG on that chance was. It'd be over 0.25, that's for sure. It was one that you would expect. I can't even remember. I think it might have been Ryan Hedges. It was a sort of cut back to him in the middle of the box, and he was unmarked. And you thought to yourself at that point, Rangers are all over the place here. And that was obviously juxtapositioned with the news that Celtic were comfortably up at Easter Road, which is now going to start informing, I think, a lot of how we feel about Rangers' performances, because Celtic have come through this awful period for them and are starting to look like they're in the mood again. They've got more goals scored, significantly more goals scored, and they've got less goals conceded. So there's a worry there, I think, and Rangers need to get back on the saddle and performing to at least something like the level of last season. Doesn't have to be the level of last season, but even another 25 to 30%, and the Rangers will have no problem in this league. But it's miles off it. It was dreadful last night for a long period, I thought. And I think people will point to possession, they'll point to expected goals. I noticed the expected goals were around 3-1. But I did not feel like Rangers were capable of cutting open Aberdeen last night. I really just didn't know where the goals were coming from. I think there's been a lot of discussion about the penalty. I think it's a soft penalty, personally. I've watched it back time and time again. I've watched it on freeze frame. I've watched it frame by frame to try and see if there was a shirt pull there. Can't really see it. I've seen one image that makes it look like there was, but certainly looking back at it on Sky and going back over and over it again, I can't see it. I think we can go into the detail, but for me, while Rangers' defence has been poor, and you only have to look at their goals conceded at this stage compared to the overall season last season to drill into the detail of that, I see major issues in the forward areas. Major issues. And perhaps we can go into that. For me, Kemar Roofe and Alfredo Morelos, I've been saying it on this video for quite a long time, it just does not work. They are both wanting to do the same thing. They are both link players who want to come short. My understanding at the time when Kemar Roofe was brought in was that Rangers had conducted a deep dive into players that were available that they could afford that were similar to Alfredo Morelos. And that's what I see. I see a player who's got a lot of similar qualities. They both want to come short and pick up the ball in midfield, and it means there's no one there to run it behind. So it all becomes really compact, and it all happens in front of the defence. I don't know why Steven Gerrard, Michael Beale are persisting with it, because I genuinely, I don't see any chemistry there between the two of them, and I don't see, beyond having two people who are technically nines and technically finishers, what they're bringing to the game. And I think Rangers look really, really isolated. Those two look really isolated, and Rangers look like they're a man short in sort of key areas a lot of the time because they've got the two up there. I don't get it. Maybe you can explain it to me, Joshua.
Well, I mean, I think that obviously they both scored against St Mirren, and the thing that happened against St Mirren was the exact same as last night in terms of, you've seen what happens when you have a lack of pace in the front line. And being at the St Mirren Stadium, I could see the height of the St Mirren back line, which was effectively at the halfway line for that 20 minutes. But they could do that because Rangers have no breakaway pace. And I think when you make a team selection like that, so instead of putting a Wright over a Hadji, or obviously Ryan Kent's injured, then you almost make a team's decision for them. It's the same with Aberdeen last night. And I mean, I think when Morelos and Roof works is Hibs second half. And why does that work? Because Rangers pin teams in. And I think Steven Gerrard would have counted on, Tavernier and Bassey taking them up the pitch. When I seen the team selection, and I thought the same against St Mirren at the weekend, I thought that's a lack of pace. And I mean, I kind of agree with you. I'm not entirely sure what I think about it, because I do think that there was games last season where it worked really well. Like, I think, Benfica, for example. But I agree with you in the sense that team selection last night doesn't complement them both, not at all, because you've not got anyone to really threaten them behind apart from Calvin Bassey last night, which isn't enough when a team like Aberdeen is coming and defending zonally and pressing high and marking the space. It's not enough. But we'll come to that. Let's first touch as well on the goals. Derek, you've seen both of them. The first goal is a mistake. In my opinion, playing out from the back creates far more goals than it concedes. It's a bad one to concede, but I think that will happen over time. The second goal, we highlighted it in our preview, Aberdeen's threat from set pieces, and it was a really poor goal to concede as well. What did you make of both of them, dare I ask?
Yeah, the first one's comedy defending, isn't it? It's one of those that you can understand it playing from the back, but Connor Goldson has to realise that if John Lundstram looks like he's in trouble, then just launch it. There's a time and a place for tippy-tappy football in your box, and Aberdeen were pressing high, so that was the wrong option, and it just made it was a farce, to be honest with you. The second goal, James Tavernier was brushed off too easily, of course. The defending was horrific. To lose a goal at a set play, looking at Rangers' aerial strength, you've got the likes of Balogun and Goldson there, is not good enough. And at that point, the atmosphere was turning very sour because the Rangers supporters were unhappy with what they were seeing. As Jonny said, that I know Steven Gerrard says they started well, but to be honest, it was just it's a start of a game. You expect Rangers to start like that. That should be a given against any team really at Ibrox. So I'm not really taking that as a positive. But again, it's slow starts. I think they've went behind 8 times this season, which is not good enough. As the manager said at the end of the game, they're giving themselves a mountain to climb, even more so when they went 2 behind. But defensively, a horror show. And how do they sort that? Well, let's just hope that Phil Hollander gets back fit as soon as possible, because he's a massive loss in that back line. I think James Tavernier, I know he provided an assist and he scored the penalty last night, but it was another poor performance from him. And you're thinking to yourself, you've got Nathan Patterson on there, and we're talking about pace and energy and bringing this team into life. Well, there's a guy sitting on the bench that would do just that. So I think it really is high time that I think Rangers need to play Nathan Patterson. It's not a case of bleeding him in anymore. I think they need to play him based on their current form.
Joshua, can I just come in on that?
Go for it.
I've seen a lot of comment that Lundstram was at fault for the first goal. I've watched it 5 or 6 times this morning. I don't think it is Lundstram's fault at all. Connor Goldson picks the ball up from the keeper, obviously, and plays a ball that looks on when he plays it, but he plays it without any pace. So by the time the ball gets there, the Aberdeen player, which is Hedges, is coming in on Lundstrom's blind side and nicks the ball before it gets to Lundstrom.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing Lundstrom can do about that. You might be aware that there's someone there, but the guy's, he can see the whole picture. Lundstrom can't see behind him without turning round. So it's just it's a ludicrous pass in terms of he shouldn't have played it anyway because Hedges was too close, and also it's not quick enough. The ball's not moved quick enough, which is something that we see all the time from Rangers. To be honest, there's too many touches before the ball's passed from the back. It's too slow. That's the one thing that I think Lundstrom has brought. He was poor last night, really poor last night. But the one thing he does do is he zips the ball across the pitch. He's got that lovely drilled pass that we don't see anyone else use. But it gets the ball moving quicker in midfield a lot of the time. And you get from one side to the other quicker. But the second goal was, Tavernier said it after the game, he held his hands up, it's his fault. But we've seen Scott Brown, how many times have we seen Scott Brown make that move from the middle of the box and then get on the end of a header from there? We've seen it over the years many, many times. So it's a disastrous mistake, that. But it's one that can happen. It's totally understandable. But I think Derek's spot on about Tavernier. Barisic has also been dreadful. I think it'd be interesting to look at their numbers this year compared to last year. The numbers from the fullback areas. It's not working in there, and it's not working in there from an offensive point of view or a defensive point of view. The teams are constantly exploiting space in Rangers' flanks in a way that wasn't happening last season. There is some sort of structural failure going on. I don't know if Rangers are trying to adapt to get more players in the box and therefore weakening the defensive structure a little bit to try and create more. But there's something that's gone askew. And they need to get it fixed fast because we all know how important this league title is for the finances of the club. Champions League football available at the end of it. And Celtic, once again, look like they've hit some kind of form.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks to everyone getting in touch as well. Loads of stuff to still talk about. Let's touch briefly on the response. I agree. I thought Tavernier was very poor defensively. He made a mistake at the weekend. Equally, I think he responds well in terms of the 2 goals don't happen without him. The game becomes difficult because Aberdeen's sitting. It's just a completely different game because they have a 2-goal lead to protect. And Stephen Gerrard said as much. It didn't look like us when we were 2-0 behind. And I guess that's the result when you have to play in such confined spaces and trying to create in a way that you hadn't prepared to, because they wouldn't have prepared to concede 2 goals within the first 20 minutes. Derek, I thought Tavernier's he'd scored one of his last 5 penalties before last night. For me, I completely agree that Patterson needs to come in and play. I think, as we've discussed before, there is ways to play them both. But I think you can't take away as well from the quality that Tavernier brings to get us back into the game. I thought you seen his reaction after the penalty as well. I thought that was a big move to go and step up. He didn't have to take that. He could have, as I say, I think it's 4 of his last 5 he's missed. That for me showed a good attitude instead of hiding after a mistake. Yeah,
I've got to admit I was a bit worried not seeing Kemar Roof, and I realised he was subbed before the penalty was awarded. So I was thinking, big moment, but full credit to him. He stepped up and he delivered. And you do. If you take Tavernier out of the team, you do take that set piece delivery away, of course. But Rangers aren't creating enough from open play at the moment, and it's blindingly obvious to see. So Nathan Patterson for me would create more in an attacking sense, and with regards to that, Calvin Bassey, I know you're touched on there. For me, again, it's his shirt to lose. I thought he'd done okay last night. Some of his deliveries were pretty decent, and he was that out ball at times. It was Goldson found him with a diagonal a couple of times, and he got in behind Ojo. So for me, he offers more than Borna Barisic has offered this season in an attacking sense, and I would be I might start him at Fir Park on Sunday. But I
think he's a doubt anyway, Borna. Yeah. Gerrard was saying after the game, so I think Bassey will play.
Yeah. So I've no qualms about that. But Tavernier for me, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Like you say, Josh, the goals don't come without him, but It's open play I'm concerned about, and they're not creating enough at the moment. It's not just Tavernier, of course. You look at the likes of Hadji, never had his best game last night, a few sloppy passes. You're looking at the likes of Aribo, who I didn't think was at his best either. And then, as Jonny mentioned, the Roof Morelos experiment hasn't worked as yet. They've been played in the same team for a number of games now. I don't see how it does work moving forward. So it's up to Steven Gerrard and the coaching staff to find a way changing the system, making Rangers more unpredictable to teams and more dangerous, and putting a bit more pace in the side. I know he took Lundstrom off last night for that more attack-minded Scott Arfield. Maybe something like that, just to change it up and be more on the front foot.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning to Douglas and Ross. Alan getting in touch saying he thought Davis should have come on. Ross saying he thinks Patterson should have come onto the pitch. James saying so sad about Walter Smith. Rest in peace to a champion from Australia. And John Dooley saying we need Ryan Jack back in the team. Jonny, is there the last week of football, I'll put this to you. You have the game over Hearts, which admittedly a bad second half, but a lot of encouragement. The game against Brøndby, Rangers' most complete 90 minutes of the season. And the game against St Mirren, where Rangers limited the opposition to an XG of 0.06 and looked far better defensively. Is there a danger in looking at and not looking at that 20 minute as an isolated period of the start of the game? Because the 20 minutes makes the 70 minutes far, far more difficult in terms of you're playing with the crowd on your back, but you're also playing against the deep defence who's sitting in. Mm. Is there a danger that, do you know what, last night wasn't great, but the events of the last week shouldn't be discarded? It's not as if Rangers haven't had by now a 90-minute performance, which they did against Brøndby, and also looked far, far better defensively against St Mirren, which, let's be honest, against Dundee United away, St Johnstone away, Dundee away, it was a complete different performance from those three games.
I didn't agree with Steven Gerrard about Brøndby.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. I thought Brøndby had a number of decent chances and the game could have been completely different because goals change games. I thought Rangers were good against Brøndby, but I didn't think it was complete or anywhere near complete. Hearts first half, great, really, really good. I'm completely on board with that. They looked electric. But second half, Hearts were more than their equal. So I know what you're saying, Josh, and certainly the numbers would back up what you're saying. 3-1 on expected goals tells you that Rangers dominated the game and had really good chances. But I think Derek touched on it there. Aside from set pieces, where's the threat coming from? Where were the chances created? Mm-hmm. It was almost, and I hate to say this because I've never felt this in Gerrard's reign until this season, Rangers are a bit boring to watch. There's just not that urgency, that blood and thunder type football that we've seen under Gerrard. I mean, even the first season when he was building that team, it was really exciting to watch. And there were moments often where you would be like, I can see what he's trying to do here. This football is going to be rock and roll when it gets going. But this season, it just seems a bit flat. That's what's kind of punctuated the whole season. It's just this kind of malaise around players. And so I would say it's a bit worrying. I've got to be honest. And now, I might be proved wrong. The numbers certainly would probably back up what you're saying, Joshua. I have to concede that. But I've got to back that up with the eye test because we all know the numbers and the eyes have to go together. And I'm just not seeing it. I just wanted to make a quick point about Morelos. I know Derek gave him 7 last night. I'd kind of disagree with that. I've got to say, the thing about Morelos for me is, and again, it's an opinion, and I'm aware there'll be people who disagree with me, I just see a real lack of work rate about Morelos. He gets himself into those positions, at the number 10 position, to lay the ball off, and then he's not busting a gut to get into the box when he needs to be. It's almost like Rangers have neutered his best qualities by turning him into this sort of Roberto Firmino type. It's like he's not grasped that he needs to do those layoffs, he needs to get involved in that play, but then he needs to also get into the box. He doesn't have that fire in his belly that he had 2 seasons ago, that we know when he's got that, he's the best striker in Scotland. He's a £20 million player, but he seems miles off that. He seems like kind of like a guy who's got his cigar out and his slippers on. And his goal record, Neil McCann was saying this on Rangers TV last night. His goal record, people say 101 goals, and he should have scored a lot more than that. This is Rangers. He's the number one striker at Rangers in the Scottish Premiership. It's not the English Premier League. This is a poor league by comparison with the elite leagues in Europe. And he's going up against Hamiltons and Ross Counties and St Mirren's, and he should be scoring more goals than he has been. So I just think he has to do a lot more as the Rangers' number one striker. I think it's time for Kemar Roof to become Rangers' number one striker and pull Morelos out of there until he starts working. Mm-hmm. For me, I honestly, I feel like no one else is seeing it but me in terms of you guys, because I feel really passionately he's not doing enough.
I think that's slightly harsh. I see your point with regards to the goal return, but you can't be a bad player if you score 101 goals for Rangers.
Derek, yes, I'm not saying he's a bad player. Obviously, I think he's a terrific player. It's just I don't see the player that we know he can be.
But that may be, Jonny, the whole trying to shoehorn Kemar Roof in beside him. And like you say, he's coming deep. He's trying to get involved in things in midfield where he shouldn't be. He shouldn't be back there. He's not at his most lethal back there. He should be rolling defenders. And he had a good old tussle with Scott Brown last night, who was playing a sort of centre-back position, which was quite comical to see at times when the referee was giving him a telling off and what have you. But that's where Rangers need him. They don't need him at the down right-hand wing and on the left-hand side and what have you. They need him in the penalty box and roughing up defenders and getting on the end of things. I mean, he got on the end of terrific delivery from Tavernier last night and got them back in the game. But I think he's just one of a number of players that are just not at it. I don't think there's anyone that's you're thinking this season that they're having a great campaign. There's not one that springs to my mind, which is worrying.
Absolutely. Okay, right, gents. Well, we'll leave it there. That was a good dissection of the game. Remember, folks, if you're watching on YouTube, to hit subscribe and the notification bell so you can get notified every time we go live, and take advantage of our superb offer, just £1 a month for the first 2 months on the Rangers Review. Today we'll have lots of stuff looking back at the game, and of course we'll be looking forward to Motherwell on Sunday, which is another huge game for Rangers, another early kickoff in which Rangers have tended to struggle. So I'm sure it'll be another really interesting game. We'll be back tomorrow morning to look ahead to Motherwell. Until then, enjoy the rest.